Good evening. I'm Savannah Sellers in for Tom Llamas. Happy to have you with us tonight. And in the college town of Moscow, Idaho, a sigh of relief. Police arresting 28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger in Pennsylvania early this morning for the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students. The 4 young victims, Ethan, Kaylee, Xana, and Madison, killed inside an off-campus house about 7 weeks ago now. The suspect now charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and felony burglary. 2 sources confirming to NBC News DNA helped lead investigators to him. Now, Moscow Police Chief James Fry got emotional about the arrest, but stayed tight-lipped about the investigation, admitting they have that white Hyundai Elantra that matched the description of a car connected to the case. However, they are still looking for the murder weapon. The grieving community and the victims' families still left wondering why this horrific crime happened. So let's get right to Dana Griffin, who leads us off tonight from Moscow, Idaho.
Police late today announcing they have the man they believe killed 4 college students.
We have an individual in custody who committed these horrible crimes.
28-year-old Brian Christopher Kohberger was taken into custody Friday morning in Monroe County, Pennsylvania, charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. DNA evidence played a key role in linking the murders to Kohberger. 2 law enforcement sources familiar with the investigation told NBC News. His white Hyundai Elantra, the biggest public clue in the case so far, was also removed from the suspect's home, police said. The arrest comes the same day crews started cleaning out the 6-bedroom rental home where Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Carnodal were found murdered November 13th. Autopsy showed all 4 were likely asleep when they were attacked. Some had defensive wounds, and each was stabbed multiple times. 2 other roommates were home at the time of the slayings, but police say they were not involved. This case has drawn national attention from internet sleuths who speculated about potential suspects and motives, leading police to over 19,000 tips while dispelling unfounded claims on social media. Police vowing this case would not go cold.
These murders have shaken our community, and no arrest will ever bring back these young students. However, we do believe justice will be found through the criminal process.
Kohberger is listed as a PhD student in the Department of Criminal Justice and Criminology at Washington State University, a short drive across the state line from the University of Idaho. Today, investigators revealed they have not found the murder weapon and why they were tight-lipped on information.
Providing any details in this criminal investigation might have tainted the upcoming criminal prosecution or alerted the suspect of our progress.
One of the missing pieces to the puzzle, his motive.
Dana Griffin joins us now from Moscow, Idaho. Dana, I mean, this has been such a long-awaited arrest, 7 weeks now. What do we know about how investigators were able to locate him? Just before we went on the air, we understand that we have confirmed they had the help of DNA evidence.
Yes, we know that DNA evidence helped link Kohberger to this case, but investigators are still remaining tight-lipped on exactly how. But they assure us that that information will come out as this plays out in the court system. Savannah?
And Dana, what are the families of those 4 young victims saying about this arrest?
So we've heard from several members of these victims' families. They have a common theme. They are all feeling relieved tonight, knowing that there has been an arrest made, and they are looking forward to what happens next as this plays out in the criminal justice system. Savannah?
All right, Dana, thank you so much. And joining us now is Jim Kavanaugh. He's a retired ATF special agent in charge and an NBC News terrorism analyst. Great to have you with us on this, Jim. Thanks so much. So the question people ask, of course, throughout this investigation is why it took so long. I mean, what's your impression on the trail that law enforcement had to follow? We heard about those 19,000 tips. What's your take on what we finally heard today?
You know, it feels long to us, Savannah, when we're watching from the outside, but when you're inside these big cases, I mean, 7 weeks is really pretty quick to make an apprehension. Think of the thousands of tips and leads. There are certainly some missteps in the beginning, communication by the police of, you know, whether everybody was safe, whether, you know, it was a crime of passion. They made some missteps, but they corrected it. They started to get out more and put more out to the public, just like the white car. They did a better job, they stayed focused, and they had enough investigators to make a break in the case. So this is pretty significant. They have some kind of DNA connection with this suspect, and they have him in possession of a vehicle that matches one on a camera at 3:30 that morning speeding in the area. So they've got those two things. Maybe they have a little bit more putting it together. It's a very, very unusual case. I think we're looking here at a unique motives. It's either power or revenge. That's probably where we are in a motive here. I think we could throw out hate, greed, and escape as motives, and we're looking more at power and revenge. Revenge, Savannah, if he may have known the victims, or revenge on the university for some reason, if it's a personal like that. But power, if it's for his own dark purpose. In other words, he has a dark purpose, and then it would be a power motive. So it's probably going to be in there. We may learn something when the probable cause affidavit is released.
Yeah, Jim, I'm seeing that question all over social media. So who is it? Did he know them? Of course, we don't know yet. But I mean, even just that analysis there is helpful to our understanding. I mean, you mentioned these things they do have, the car, DNA. One thing they actually were very head on in answering is they still have not found the murder weapon. How important is that?
Well, I mean, it's always important when you're an investigator on these or a commander, you want the murder weapon because that's so significant. But you can still convict people without it. Killers often get rid of their weapons, guns, bombs, knives, bludgeons. They throw them away, they hide them, they bury them. Often when people travel a long distance like this across the country, Idaho to Pennsylvania, there's an easy opportunity to toss that over a bridge in a river, a lake, a body of water. Very easy opportunity. They don't even stop on the highway. They just toss it out over the bridge, and it's, you know, never found. But he could have retained it if he thinks he's so smart and he thinks he's smarter than the police. He might have retained it. He might have buried it. It could be hidden in his home. They could find it in a search warrant. So all those possibilities are open. But nevertheless, whether they find it or not, if they have DNA matches, you know, suspect vehicle, any incriminating statements, they should be able to have a strong criminal case against him. And it is a vicious, vicious, brutal crime. And I think we're going to find out that the motive is going to be really unusual and unique, because this is a unique and unusual murder, mass murder.
Jim, so many people online are wondering what's next. Investigators at the presser did say this is just the beginning. First, I want to play a little bit of that.
However, we do believe justice will be found through the criminal process. This was a very complex and extensive case. We had developed a clear picture over time, and we stand assured that the work is not done, but be assured the work is not done. This has just started.
Now, Jim, as we mentioned, this was across the country from where this took place. Took place in Idaho, all the way in Pennsylvania. Of course, that extradition process is going to take some time, but what does come next?
Well, the key here is what our NBC colleague asked at the press conference when she asked the chief, you know, did the killer say, did you arrest anybody else? That was a statement he made when he was arrested. Did you arrest anyone else? And that begs the question, does he think there's someone else involved? Was he acting with a Confederate? Was he trying to frame somebody who did it? So that's a big question, and I think as a commander you'd want to know, was there somebody else acting with him, somebody help him? Was he trying to pin it on somebody? Did he place the knife in somebody's car or house? You know, was he going to allege that guy did it? Did another guy do it? Were there two killers in the house? So there's a lot of open questions here that they have to answer. So to build on your inquiry there, Savannah, is what else is left? That's a big portion of it. The other part is, did he murder before these murders, and did he murder during the trip from Idaho to Pennsylvania, or even a year or 2 years before? We don't know. This guy killed 4 people one night. He could have killed before. Maybe the bodies were never found. Maybe he was never a suspect. So a lot of things have to be looked into now.
All right, Jim. Yes, so many questions. So thank you for helping us answer some of them tonight. We appreciate your time. Now, tonight, fresh data from the CDC shows a rapid nationwide spread of the newest COVID variant. It's known as XBB, and this Omicron subvariant has doubled in cases in the last week. And now, with New Year's celebrations around the corner, experts are urging the public to take precautions. NBC's Valerie Castro has more.
Happy New Year! As we close in on New Year's Eve, Times Square is once again the draw for tens of thousands eager to ring in 2023.
I've heard there are a lot of people in Times Square during this time of the year, so yeah, I'm gonna try.
But along with the glittering ball and pounds of confetti ready to fly, the XBB COVID variant is rapidly spreading.
Have you heard of XBB?
Yeah, we're a couple of us are physicians, so we're well versed in sort of what's going on right now.
So what are you hearing?
This is another thing that puts us on alert, but it's hard to know, truthfully.
The CDC issuing a tweet today with an ominous projection saying XBB is now projected to make up more than 40% of cases nationwide, double from just last week, and says it may be more transmissible than other variants. Medical experts warning vaccines do not fully prevent infection from this variant.
It may be more capable of overriding vaccine protection. It can't completely evade the vaccine protection, but a little more capable than former previous strains of COVID.
In the Northeast, XBB now accounts for more than 70% of cases, up from 50% just a week ago.
When you just said it, I was resistant to urge to take out my mask and just put it on. So yeah, a bit worried.
The rapid rise concerning, but not giving way to new mandates yet.
Last year, ringing in the new year here in Times Square meant showing proof of vaccinations and wearing a mask. But this year, for the first time since the pandemic, there are no restrictions.
I think it's crazy. I feel like people are getting a little too comfortable with it.
The city of New York estimating more than 1 million people will flood the area.
People are really kind of jumping the gun, unfortunately, which of course is going to perpetuate the spread. With no masks, crowding together, no rules, partying like it's 2018. It's just not. It's not ready for that yet.
Not everyone plans to pack into the crossroads of the world.
We've actually got an Airbnb just outside Times Square that we're going to steer clear of some of the action.
But medical experts caution as XBB spreads, even smaller celebrations, especially indoors, could be risky.
It's more transmissible and therefore it's more dangerous. And did you get vaccinated? And really, if it was my party, I'd say, please don't come if you have not been vaccinated.
Valerie Castro joins us now from Times Square. Valerie, so only 37% of people have gotten that most recent COVID booster. How concerning is that specifically based on what we know about XBB's infection rates?
Savannah, that doctor we spoke with earlier today says it is crucial to be up to date on that most recent booster, the bivalent booster. It does offer some protection against Omicron, so it will also offer some cross protection against this variant. But he warns that even if you are vaccinated, if you have any symptoms, even something minor like a runny nose, you should consider staying home tomorrow night to avoid putting others at risk. Savannah.
All right, Valerie, thank you so much. And let's stay on this now because COVID hospitalizations are rising. And here to explain why is Dr. David Hamer. He's the interim director of the Center for Emerging Infectious Diseases at Boston University. Doctor, thanks so much for being with us tonight. So, let's just talk about exactly what we just heard there in Valerie's story. This new Omicron subvariant is dominant in the Northeast. 70% of new cases are specifically XBB. I'm wondering what you're seeing on the ground in hospitals. Does this seem more infectious?
I think it's too early to tell. There's, some suggestive evidence that it's more infectious or more transmissible, but we don't really have solid data yet. It's an Omicron subvariant. What's interesting is it's displacing other variants so quickly, and this is what we saw actually about a year ago with Omicron. Omicron came in and within just a few weeks displaced Delta and other variants that were circulating at the time. This is moving in very quickly, which would suggest that it's more transmissible.
Now, ICU admissions are up nearly 10% nationwide. That's the stat on that. And Valerie's story had this alert from the CDC that nationwide cases of XBB, again, that new variant, have doubled in just the last week. Given how people are going to be gathering in the next 48 hours, now that was a lot of the conversation there, but we'd love to hear from you. How much faster do you think this will spread after a weekend of people headed to New Year's Eve parties?
I'm very worried about this weekend. I mean, this whole period of time, I mean, I think a lot of people have been exposed recently through gatherings of different kinds, both with family and friends. And then with New Year's Eve coming, there's a greater risk. I mean, there's some suggestion that the bivalent vaccine induces antibodies that help protect against this new variant. And so that having had that vaccine should reduce the risk to some extent, but that's really going to help reduce the risk, especially of severe disease and hospitalization. It's going to be less effective against preventing infections altogether. But I think it suggests that this is a time where we should be much more cautious over the next few weeks and consider mask use when we're indoors and in crowded places, where it's feasible.
Doctor, if we think back to some other variants, Delta, Omicron, everyone seemed to be talking about those. They seemed to be worried about those as soon as they heard of a new variant. It was sort of a concern. But a lot of people seem unaware of this particular one, XBB. Do you think that that's in some ways attributable to a large amount of fatigue, or people just kind of feeling like, okay, even if there's a new one, we have to live with it? And if so, what would you say to that?
I think there's definitely fatigue. I mean, people are tired of having to sort of deal and hear about new variants. But it's also, I think this virus keeps evolving and keeps evading our immune response. And so people that have had Omicron, this is so different from the original Omicron that they're not that well protected. And so it's feasible to become infected multiple times. And I understand the feeling of being sort of tired of it, but on the other hand, to protect those who are more vulnerable, we really need to be cautious, and that means getting the bivalent vaccine booster if one's not had it, and then masking in public places, and maybe trying to restrict large gatherings, all which are difficult this time of year, and especially in a time when people are really tired of being in public, or not being out in public.
Absolutely. Doctor, we appreciate your time tonight. Lots of good information there for people, good warnings for those gathering for New Year's. Happy New Year to you. We appreciate you being on with us tonight.
Happy New Year. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, another concern this New Year's weekend, the weather. Southwest Airlines just now returning to normal service after thousands of canceled flights this week. But travelers may want to brace for more delays as some parts of the country prepare to ring in the new year with heavy rain. Stephanie Gosk has the details.
After turning holiday joy into travel hell for many of its customers, canceling thousands of flights, Southwest says the airline is back on schedule and promising changes to its operation. But regaining customer confidence might be a taller task.
I think half my friends stopped booking Southwest after this week.
Those with Southwest flights out of Chicago's Midway Airport today were crossing their fingers.
It's scary, but I have to go, right?
In Sacramento, Southwest employees scrambled to find customers' unclaimed bags.
Round 3.
The luggage made it, but the passengers never did. Things are getting better. Southwest only canceled dozens of flights today, as air travel across the country improved overall, according to the website FlightAware, with traveler sights on New Year's Eve celebrations. In New York City, the famous Waterford crystal ball was tested, and it works.
2, 1, yeah!
This family flew in from Brisbane, Australia.
It's very intense with the hype and the amount of people that are here this year. So
that it's kind of come back to life.
Yeah.
Post-COVID.
Well, definitely come back to life.
New York officials keeping a close eye on public safety. Across the country, the party is back on, from Atlanta to the Rose Bowl parade in Pasadena. In some places, rain could make for soggy celebrations, torrential downpours on the West Coast, and the heavy rain in the south that delayed the Sugar Bowl parade exits off the Atlantic coast as a new round of rain heads toward the northeast.
Happy New Year!
Reaching Boston and New York just as revelers are ringing in the new year.
Unfortunately for the crowds tomorrow night, one of the security rules is no umbrellas. But wet clothes doesn't necessarily mean dampened spirits. It should still be a great party. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie Gosk, thank you. And now for a closer look at that New Year's Eve forecast, I want to bring in meteorologist Angie Lassman. Angie, How is it looking for the ball drop, and can any cities expect a washout fully as they head into the new year?
Definitely. A lot of cities. The East Coast and the West Coast are going to be wet. The middle of the country looks great, but how about the ball? This is what my DMs have been filled with. How is it going to look in Times Square? A little wet. It'll be mild. The good news is temperatures will be into the mid-50s, so can't complain about that. And it's not just Times Square. It's really the eastern half of the country where places like Kansas City will hit 57 degrees by the time Sunday rolls around, 62 degrees in Nashville on Saturday, and ending up at 66 degrees. The warmth does not end on Saturday and Sunday, though. We take that right into the next work week. As far as the rain is concerned, it's draped across the eastern half of the country, but it's also on the West Coast. That couple of West Coast storms that we've already seen work in over the past couple of days have left the ground saturated. It's going to continue to be saturated there as well, with more rain working through. And as we head into midnight, you can see clear skies for the middle section of the country, and then finally nicer conditions on the East Coast as we roll into New Year's Day. Those storms exit, but unfortunately the West Coast, Savannah, is still going to be dealing with the rain, the snow, and the potential for some windy conditions too.
Angie, we know that we just had this, total headache, total travel meltdown with the last winter storm. What are some trouble spots, if any, that could be an issue for travelers through this next holiday?
Yeah, and I think the West Coast and the East Coast, those are the areas that we're going to see some issues. When we look at Saturday, it looks like places like Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Washington might have a couple of trouble spots. We're not expecting a lot of rain in those areas, but more like Atlanta, Charlotte, we'll watch for the potential for some stronger storms there. As we look to the West Coast, this is where we're going to want to watch from Saturday to Sunday, because as I mentioned, those storms don't move out. We're going to have multiple. So Salt Lake City, San Francisco, I think those will be the trouble spots, and that continues on Sunday as well. East Coast on Sunday, though, looks pretty good. Boston might have a little bit of heavy rain to deal with, though, Savannah.
All right, Angie Lastman working around the clock. Go take a break. Happy New Year's. Thank you so much. And next, to former President Trump's tax returns made public after a years-long legal battle. The former president refused to be transparent with his income during his campaign and time in the White House. So what have we learned? NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Hake has the key takeaways.
Thousands of pages of Donald Trump's tax returns show the former president paid relatively little in federal taxes from 2015 through the end of his term, including a $0 federal tax bill in 2020 as his businesses struggled. The returns showing that despite a pledge to donate his $400,000 presidential salary, he reported no charitable contributions in 2020. And also showing the billionaire Mr. Trump losing money in 4 of the 6 years covered, appearing to undercut a central element of his political biography, his success as a businessman.
What Donald Trump does is collects money from businesses he has, and then the businesses lose money. He uses those losses to offset the income that flows into his pocket. Overall, he's a terrible businessman.
The filings showing he maintained foreign bank accounts in China, the United Kingdom, and Ireland. And in 2020 reported $78 million in income, but even greater losses in 15 countries, including China, Qatar, and Turkey. The returns posted today after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the House Ways and Means Committee in November, ending a 3-year legal battle.
Mr. Snyder.
Aye. A party-line committee vote last week authorized the returns release with redactions. Mr. Trump firing back at what he called a deranged political witch hunt, suggesting Republicans should retaliate in the new Congress next year.
The radical Democrats' behavior is a shame upon the U.S. Congress. This precedent must now be applied to the corrupt Democrats themselves.
If Republicans are serious about retaliating for this move, they can't start with President Biden. His tax returns are already public. But some Republicans have suggested going after Hunter Biden, his son. Speaker Pelosi has been suggested by former President Trump, or possibly even future Supreme Court nominees, all of whom could see their private tax information exposed in just the same way if House Republicans do decide to try to retaliate. Savannah?
Back now with the aspiring model charged with murder. Police in New York City arresting a woman who they say stabbed her father to death in their own home and gravely wounded her sister. Tonight, the horrifying accounts from neighbors and what she told authorities that police now say was all a lie. WNBC's Melissa Colorado has more.
Nikki, what happened? An aspiring model, now accused killer, caught in a flurry of flashing lights as she's escorted out of the 62nd precinct in Brooklyn. Police say 22-year-old Nikki Sencandino went on a stabbing spree, killing her father, 61-year-old Carl Sencandino, and gravely injuring her 19-year-old sister, Liana, who continues to fight for her life at Maimonides Medical Center. This is a photo of the three family members during happier times before their Bensonhurst apartment on 17th Avenue turned into a bloody crime scene.
This is an anomaly. It's a very, very quiet neighborhood.
This neighbor, who asked us to blur her face for safety reasons, says she heard screams and the sound of bodies slamming against the wall coming from the family's apartment this morning.
I saw the blood in the hallway, and that's when I got shaken up and I closed the door and locked it.
Police say at first Sencandino concocted a story claiming two men in ski masks forced their way into the home and demanded to be shown a safe. But police say the web of lies unraveled quickly. Police say Sencandino suffered cuts to her hands, but it's unclear if they were self-inflicted or not. Close to the crime scene, the two places where Carl Sencandino was known to work at, Panino Rustico and Mike's Diner, where his youngest daughter waited tables last summer.
A lot of people are gonna miss him here. He's like just a wonderful person.
I'm just in shock. He's a very nice man. He was a very nice man. Very nice. And I hope that God rest his soul.
Neighbors tell News 4 police officers visited the apartment in the past, responding to calls about fights between family members. The manager at Mike's Diner says just yesterday, Carl dropped a hint that something wrong was happening at home.
He was worried about the situation going on in his house.
And coming up, Pope Emeritus Benedict in stable condition tonight. The health update from the Vatican after Pope Francis said his 95-year-old predecessor was, quote, very ill. That's up next. Back now with Top Stories news feed, and we begin with end-of-the-year pardons by President Biden. The president pardoning 6 people convicted of murder, drug, and alcohol-related crimes. This includes an 80-year-old woman who killed her abusive husband nearly half a century ago. They come 2 months after the president pardoned thousands of federal marijuana convictions. Overseas now, and a deadly flooding disaster unfolding in the Philippines. Heavy rains submerging roads and homes across the country. So far, at least 32 people killed and 24 still missing. More than 56,000 people are now in emergency shelters. And an update on former Pope Benedict after Pope Francis said he was, quote, very ill. The Vatican says the 95-year-old is in stable condition and was even able to participate in a private mass today. Pope Francis had announced his predecessor was sick after visiting him on Wednesday. And back here at home, someone could be entering the new year a new millionaire. The Mega Millions jackpot now a whopping $685 million. The next drawing is tonight at 11 p.m. Eastern. It's the largest end-of-year Mega Millions jackpot and is the 4th largest in the game's history. And now to an incredible story out of Florida. An NFL quarterback helped save survivors of a helicopter crash while on a jet ski. And part of the rescue caught on new body camera footage. Priscilla Thompson has this story.
The helicopter just crashed into the ocean. It just sunk. It looks like there's like maybe 3 or 4 people floating in the water.
A dramatic water rescue after a helicopter crashed off the coast of Florida.
We got 1 passenger on board, 51 to the boat ramp on the Sutton Channel side. The other occupants are on the jet skis.
Tampa police pulling the pilot to safety. The other 3 people on board saved by a Good Samaritan.
I'm going to take them right to the beach. I'm on 2 Yamaha jet skis.
That helpful stranger, none other than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers backup quarterback, Blaine Gabbert.
It was pretty remarkable. We got him. I got 2 on my jet ski. My brother's got 1. The pilot was still in the water.
Gabbert says he was jet skiing with his brothers when he heard a noise and went to check it out. What he found was a downed helicopter submerged near the Davis Islands with 4 people thrown overboard.
It almost looked like a crew boat in the water that had broken up into about 4 pieces, and I vaguely remember seeing like 2 yellow life jackets. The youngest kid had just came up and said he was pinned in there.
That passenger was 28-year-old Hunter Hupp.
We were trapped under so much stuff, and
I had so many cables and wires and headsets and seatbelts all around me.
He was underwater for nearly a minute, Hupp says, and wasn't sure he'd survive.
I'm pretty astounded that I am standing here to talk to you.
Hupp and his parents were on a sightseeing tour of Tampa Bay Thursday when authorities say their chopper's engine failed.
We heard a loud pop from the top. I was in the front. I asked the pilot if we just hit something. He goes, no, but this isn't really good.
The pilot made an emergency landing, crashing about 200 yards from shore as onlookers watched in disbelief.
It was crazy. It was insane, but I'm just happy they got out.
Thanks in part to Gabbard and his brothers jumping into action. Gabbard, who chose to remain anonymous at first, coming forward now.
I was just trying to do the right thing, help them out. Clearly they were in need, and I'm happy they all made it out alive.
The big rescue behind him, Gabbard is back at work, preparing for Sunday's big game, as he's being hailed a hero both on and off the field.
And Savannah, more good news. All 4 of those passengers escaped uninjured. And as for Gabbard, the Tampa Bay police has named him an honorary member of their Marine Patrol. One more achievement on an already pretty impressive resume.
Finally tonight, we have a special segment to wrap up 2022. Here at Top Story, we cover everything from politics to natural disasters to stories of hope. And a lot of people behind the scenes are the ones who take those stories from out in the field to here in the studio to your TV or to your phone. On our last show of the year, we want to give you a look at the team that makes this all happen, and a special and very personal thank you from me to them. Live from New York, it's the Top Story staff.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.